Can the president count on American Catholics to support him in November? Those of faith don't necessarily vote as a monolith, but there are some trends that could cause concern. President Trump's favorability rating among white Catholics has dropped almost by half since March. That's according to the latest poll conducted by the Public Religion Research Institute. And look at this. It went from 60% in March to just 37% in May. The poll was taken during the week of widespread civil unrest over the killing of George Floyd. But there's another poll that looks at specific issues. The Pew Research Institute looked at president's handling of COVID-19, and this was prior to the unrest. It showed white Catholics approved of his response as excellent or good by a margin of 55, and that was down 7%. And that same poll showed 70% of Hispanic Catholics said Trump's response was fair or just poor. Well, joining us now is Drew Mariani, host of the Drew Mariani Show, and also joining us is contributor at thecatholicthing.org and the author of The American Catholic Voter, George Marlin. Gentlemen, thanks for being here.
Good to be here with you, Lindsay. Sure.
All right, guys. So here's the thing that I think is interesting. There's obviously sort of not necessarily a monolithic group here. You've got sort of what I would call the devout, hardcore Catholics, and then you got the cafeteria Catholics. And I think that they break down kind of differently. But I also think the thing that's going to be unique about this election is that Biden's claims he's a practicing Catholic. And so you've got Trump that's got the record, but Biden who's a member of this religion. So, Drew, let me start with you. How do you think this thing breaks down, considering Biden is a Catholic, practicing according to himself, but yet I don't see necessarily the bloc in terms of the devout Catholics or the cafeteria Catholics necessarily looking for the label and saying, I'm just going to vote because that guy's part of my faith?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden's profile, he profiles his Catholicism in his advertisements on his website, but at one point, he was very pro-life. He says he prays a rosary, he attends mass, he finds solace in his Catholicism, but his legacy as an elected official certainly does not reflect that. And you could see that with the Hyde Amendment, the Mexico City policy, his strong support now of Planned Parenthood. In fact, his website's pledging that he will restore federal funding to Planned Parenthood, and he'll rescind the Mexico City policy, amongst others. You know, as Catholics, as a voting bloc, you're right, we're not monolithic. What we are, though, is divided, and that's an unfortunate reality. We constitute maybe 22, 25% of the entire electorate that's out there. But during the last election, during the election of Donald Trump, 52% of Catholics voted for Donald Trump. And you got to be careful with your terms, because like you pointed out, Sean, are these cafeteria Catholics? Are they Catholics in name only, or are they indeed devout Catholics? If you are a devout Catholic, you're going to have a real problem with Joe Biden. Look, Donald Trump's not perfect. He's got lots of foibles too, but he has been very pro-life. He has made some good judicial Supreme Court picks, amongst others. Out of the electorate, though, 38% of that Catholic voting bloc is Hispanic. And although 52% of Catholics went for Biden or for Trump last election, 38% voted for Hillary Clinton. So I think in the coming days, in the election, we're 4 months and some change now. I think the Latino vote is going to be an important aspect of the election, and it'll be interesting to see how he deals with them, because he does not have a good favorability rating with Hispanics, unfortunately.
Yeah, George, speaking of the Hispanic vote, Latinos didn't, as Drew mentioned, he didn't get a lot of vote a lot for Trump. But with Trump's stance on DACA and immigration being very firm, do you think that will hurt Trump even more in 2020 election?
I don't think it's going to matter all that much, quite frankly. What matters to him is the practicing Catholics, which are about 6% of the voting public. And what matters here is they happen to be disproportionately in Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, in the states he needs to carry, and Ohio, states he needs to carry. The Hispanic vote in many of the states just don't matter. In California, it doesn't matter. In New York, it doesn't matter. So he has to get back on the reservation, because they've gotten off for a couple of reasons. One is Main Street America is unemployed right now, and that hurts Trump. That's why the economy has to come back in the next couple of months. There's been some disappointments with Supreme Court rulings in the past week, and that hurts the issue as well. So when you look at, say, Pennsylvania, two of the most Catholic counties in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, the old Rust Belt area, Cambria County and Elk County, interestingly enough, Obama carried it in 2008, Romney carried it in 2012, but a lot of people stayed home because they didn't like Romney because they thought he was a plutocrat. And then they came back in huge numbers in 2016 for Trump. While Obama got 41% of the vote in those two counties, Hillary Clinton got around 26% of the vote. And more important, they turned out in greater numbers for Trump than they did for Romney because they didn't like Romney. And they didn't like McCain for that matter either. So those are the states that matter. The Cuban Catholics down in Florida certainly matter. Trump got 23% of the Hispanic vote last time around. I think Romney got about 14%. So around the edges, they somewhat matter. But if he can't carry Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, the election is over.
Yeah,
and those elections are very tight back then.
Yeah, there's no question about it. The thing that's interesting, Drew, is, and I'm going to boil this down to very simplistic terms, but President Trump, by sort of a lot of the definition of lifestyle, probably, if you'd say in style, doesn't necessarily fall in line with the Catholic teachings. But the policies that he's sort of gotten enacted and the judges that he's supported have all been pretty much in keeping with what the church has asked for in terms of pro-life. And yet you've got Biden, and as you correctly point out, his policies don't match up, but he says and does the right thing. So if you had to look into a crystal ball on Election Day, if it was 52-38 last time with Hillary, where do you think that thing breaks down if you had to put it today, Trump versus Biden now?
See, I think we underestimate the power of the Supreme Court in the election last election. I think a lot of people recognized that there were going to be some seats that would become available. Of course, we had two nominations from him. We might see two more in this coming election as well. I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is 87 years old. Stephen Breyer is 81. If Joe Biden wins, they're going to step down and they're going to be replaced. And it'll be interesting to see who will be nominated by Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. Donald Trump gave us that list of candidates in the last election. And I think Americans were passionate, Catholics in particular, were passionate about the courts. I think many Americans are concerned about the future of their religious freedoms and their ability to worship. I think life is always a paramount issue. The bishops of the United States Catholic Conference recently came out and they said that should be the preeminent priority in this coming election. Now, that's a tough issue because Catholics aren't single voter, right? They're not single issue voters. However, that's got to be the top of the pyramid, and I think it is. They understood what looms in the future of the Supreme Court when it comes to life. We might see that ruling coming up next week. We might see something that'll have a profound impact on that. But take a look at the Bostock decision that came out of the Supreme Court just this week. Today is the anniversary of the Obergefell decision, where we redefined marriage. Look at the legislation from the bench with the courts in '73 with Roe v. Wade. So I think the courts are a huge part of this. I reached 220 million people on my broadcast, and this over and over and again is on the forefront of their minds. So I think when it comes to the Supreme Court, the mainstream media doesn't talk a whole lot about it. I mean, there's some conversation, right, but I really do believe that it's an issue that resonates in the hearts of a lot of people. A lot of people did not want to vote for Donald Trump, but they knew how important the Supreme Court.
And I think that's a great point. I've talked about this before. It comes down to a binary choice, and this time you actually don't have to. It's not theoretical with Trump anymore. You can actually look at the policies. The one thing that I would add to this discussion is I think it's going to depend on what parish you live in and how active the pastor there or the other priest preach from the pulpit as far as what you should be doing with your vote and what you should be looking at in terms of policies. I've seen from church to church that varies come Election Day. Gentlemen, this is going to be something that we keep an eye on going forward. I think as more polling comes out and we know more, I'd love to bring you back and see where we are close to the election. So thank you for being here. Have a great weekend.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Well, coming up, Sean and I will continue this conversation and give you our take on the Catholic vote and the 2020 election.